The evening had started like any other. The city was busy but calm, with people walking home after long days, lost in their phones or their thoughts. Traffic moved slowly, horns sounding now and then, and the air carried the usual mix of dust and street food. No one expected anything out of the ordinary to happen. He was finishing his shift at a small roadside repair shop. His hands were dark with oil, his back sore from bending all day. Life had never been easy for him. He lived alone in a small rented room and counted every expense. Still, he believed in one simple rule: if someone needed help, and he could help. As he locked the shop gate, he noticed a woman across the street near a bus stop. She looked well-dressed, confident, the kind of person who seemed used to being in control. She was speaking on her phone, her voice tense. The streetlight above her flickered. Then everything changed in seconds. Loud screech cut through the noise of the street. A speeding vehicle lost control while trying to overtake another car. People shouted. Someone dropped a bag. The woman turned too late. She slipped on the uneven pavement and fell hard. Dangerously close to the road, time slowed. The man saw it clearly, the vehicle swerving toward the sidewalk. The woman frozen in fear, unable to get up fast enough. People nearby screamed or stepped back. Some covered their faces. No one moved forward, no one except him. He ran without thinking. His body reacted before his mind could argue about risk or fear. His shoes slipped as he crossed the road, but he kept going. In one strong motion, he grabbed the woman by her arm and pulled her away from the edge. The vehicle missed them by inches before crashing into a pole. The sound was deafening. They both hit the ground. His shoulder struck first, pain shooting through his arm. The woman was shaking, gasping for air, her phone lying broken nearby. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the noise returned. People rushed forward. Someone called for an ambulance. Others crowded around, talking loudly, recording videos, asking questions no one could answer. The woman tried to sit up but couldn't. Tears ran down her face, not from pain but from shock. Her hands trembled. She kept repeating the same words over and over, barely audible. I almost died. I almost died. The man pushed himself up despite the pain. His head felt light and his shoulder burned, but he ignored it. He helped her sit against a wall and told her to breathe slowly. His voice was calm, steady, like he had done this before, even though he hadn't. Just breathe, he said softly. You're safe now. She looked at him for the first time. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear and confusion. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. She nodded instead. Sirens approached. The flashing lights painted the street red and blue. Police and medical workers arrived quickly. The crowd stepped back. The medics checked the woman first. They asked her questions, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and placed a neck brace carefully. She kept looking around, still in shock. When one of them asked who helped her, several people pointed toward the man. He pulled her back, someone said. If he hadn't run, the sentence was left unfinished. But everyone understood. A medic turned toward him and asked if he was hurt. He shook his head, even though his shoulder throbbed. He didn't want attention. He didn't want to be part of the story. I'm fine, he said. The woman tried to reach for him as they lifted her onto the stretcher. Her hand trembled as it brushed his sleeve. Thank you, she whispered. You saved me, gave a small nod. That was all. As they wheeled her into the ambulance, he stepped back into the crowd. No one stopped him. No one asked his name. Within minutes, it was as if he had never been there at all. He walked home slowly. Each step made his shoulder ache more, but the pain felt distant. His mind replayed the moment again and again, the sound of the brakes, her terrified eyes, the weight of her body as he pulled her away. He didn't think of himself as a hero. He didn't feel proud. Mostly, he felt tired. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw how close it had been. He wondered if she was okay, if she would recover fully. Then he reminded himself that her life would go on, and his would stay the same. He had no idea that their paths were not finished crossing. He had no idea that in just a few days, The woman whose life he saved would sit in judgment of him. Without recognizing his face, without knowing his story, for now. All he knew was that he had done what felt right, and sometimes that is all a person can do. The woman woke up to the steady sound of machines and quiet footsteps. The white ceiling above her felt unfamiliar. For a few seconds, she didn't remember where she was or why her body felt so heavy. Then the memory rushed back, the noise, the fear, the moment she thought everything would end. Her breathing became fast. A nurse noticed and came closer, speaking gently, telling her she was safe, that she had been lucky. Very lucky. She turned her head slowly and saw the window. Morning light filled the room. Outside, the world was moving like nothing had happened. Cars passed, people walked, life continued. But inside her, something had changed. She had always believed she was strong. She had built her life by staying in control, by making careful decisions, by never depending on anyone. Yet in one moment, she had been helpless. And a stranger had stepped in when everyone else stood back. She tried to remember his face clearly. All she could recall were tired eyes, oil-stained hands, and a calm voice telling her to breathe. She felt a strange mix of gratitude and discomfort. Gratitude because she was alive. Discomfort because her life had been saved by someone she would normally never notice. Later that day, doctors explained her injuries. She would recover fully. No permanent damage. Another reminder of how close she had come to losing everything. When she was alone again, she picked up her phone. Messages flooded in. Friends, colleagues, family, all expressing concern. Some had already seen videos online. The incident had spread quickly. "You're lucky," one message read. "Someone pulled you back just in time." Lucky. The word stayed with her. Meanwhile, across the city, the man woke up late for work. His shoulder was stiff, swollen, and painful. He tried to lift his arm and winced. Still, he got ready and left. Missing a day of work meant losing money he couldn't afford to lose. At the repair shop, his movements were slower than usual. His coworker noticed and asked what happened. He shrugged it off, saying he had slipped the night before. He didn't mention the woman or the accident. He didn't see it as something worth talking about. During his lunch break, he sat alone, eating quietly. His mind wandered back to the incident, but not in the way people might expect. He didn't replay the danger. Instead, he wondered if she had anyone with her at the hospital. He hoped she wouldn't feel alone. That thought surprised him. He had always lived on the edge of society, unnoticed and easily judged. Over time, he had learned not to expect kindness or recognition. Helping her hadn't changed that belief. It was just a moment. Life moved on. For the woman. Life also moved on, but not smoothly. After she was discharged, she returned to her apartment. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt right. She stood in the shower longer than usual, letting the water run. Thinking about how fragile everything really was, she told herself she would not let fear control her. She went back to work sooner than advised. Her job required focus, authority, and decisions that affected other people's lives. She was respected, even feared at times, for her sharp judgment and strict standards. In meetings, people listened when she spoke. She was used to that power. It made her feel safe. But small things started bothering her. Loud noises made her tense. Crossing busy streets felt harder, and sometimes when she saw people rushing past workers on the roadside, she remembered the man's worn shoes and quiet courage. She pushed the thoughts away. A few days later, she received a case file. It was routine. She scanned the details quickly, already forming opinions. Background information. Employment history. Financial struggles. Gaps that told a story she thought she understood. She sighed, leaning back in her chair. She had seen many like this before. People asking for chances, for understanding. Experience had taught her to be careful. Sympathy, she believed, often led to poor decisions. She didn't know that this file belonged to the man who had saved her at the same time. The man received a notice that made his stomach tighten. He sat on the edge of his bed, reading it again and again. It meant facing people who would decide his future, people who would see his records, his past mistakes, and judge him without knowing who he really was. He felt nervous, but not angry. He had been judged his whole life. This was nothing new. The night before the meeting, he lay awake staring at the ceiling. His shoulder still hurt. His body was tired. Yet his thoughts were calm. Whatever happened, he would deal with it. Across the city, the woman sat at her desk late, reviewing documents. She paused for a moment, rubbing her temples. Something felt off, though she couldn't explain why. She thought again of the stranger from that night. She wondered if she would ever see him again. Neither of them knew how close they already were, and neither of them could imagine how quickly gratitude could turn into judgment when faces changed and roles were reversed. The day finally arrived when their paths would cross again, though neither knew it yet. The woman sat at her desk in a brightly lit office, surrounded by files and reports that demanded her attention. Her work required her to make decisions that impacted people's lives, and she had long perfected the skill of evaluating quickly, judging efficiently, and moving on without hesitation. She had no idea that the man who had saved her life days ago was about to enter the same space in a completely different role. He had been asked to appear before a review panel, a group responsible for deciding whether he could move forward in a program that could change his circumstances. The irony was that she was on that panel, evaluating people who appeared before her with only the limited information provided in their files. When he entered the room, he carried a quiet presence. He looked ordinary, almost invisible, and his clothes were plain, worn, and simple. He tried to steady his nerves, reminding himself that he had done nothing wrong. Yet he could feel the weight of the panel's scrutiny already. The woman glanced up when he was called. Her eyes traveled over him quickly, noting his unremarkable appearance. She saw hesitation in his step, a subtle stiffness from his injured shoulder. But she interpreted it as uncertainty, weakness. Her mind immediately formed judgments. Someone so unpolished, so awkward, probably unreliable, perhaps even careless. She had seen this type before. People who appeared as he did rarely succeeded. He stepped forward, bowed slightly, and offered a quiet greeting. His voice was steady, but humble. He presented his documents, answered questions carefully, and explained his situation with honesty. Every word he spoke carried sincerity, though it was understated. The woman listened, but her judgment had already formed. Her mind filtered the facts through assumptions: a plain appearance, a humble tone, past struggles. She decided she knew enough to rate him poorly. To her, professionalism was about polish, confidence, and control, not quiet honesty as he spoke. He glanced around the room, unaware of her connection to the past incident. He didn't remember her either, not in this context. To him, she was another official, another authority figure whose opinion would impact his life. He remained polite, patient, and focused on the facts. The questions continued. Some were straightforward, others probing for weakness. The woman's expressions shifted subtly as she pressed on, testing his answers, measuring his confidence. She remained unaware of the irony that this man, whom she had relied on to save her life, was being judged now by the very criteria she valued. He answered calmly, never raising his voice, never showing frustration. At times, he paused to think, and in those pauses, the woman's mind filled in assumptions: hesitation, indecisiveness, lack of preparation. She nodded slightly to herself, confirming her conclusions. Around them, the room buzzed with low murmurs and the quiet shuffle of papers. Other panel members occasionally whispered to one another, taking notes, asking follow-up questions. The man met each inquiry with respect and clarity, though his simplicity seemed to irritate some of the members who preferred elaborate explanations or confident gestures, despite his composure. The woman's judgments grew firmer. She thought about the lives he would impact if given a chance. In her mind, someone like him was a risk, perhaps a burden. She didn't know about his courage, his willingness to act under pressure, or the strength it took to face fear for someone else's life. To her, only what she could see mattered. He left the room after the final question, bowed slightly again, and walked out quietly. No one tried to stop him. He had done his best. For him, that was enough. Outside, the woman remained seated, staring at the papers in front of her. She felt a sense of certainty in her decision. She believed she had done the right thing, followed the rules, and protected the process. Yet a small, unrecognized tug of familiarity lingered in the back of her mind. Something about him seemed familiar, though she couldn't place it. The day moved on. Meetings, calls, emails. Her mind shifted back to her routine. Yet the memory of his quiet presence lingered more than she realized. She had judged him in seconds, based on assumptions, appearances, and incomplete information. Unaware that her life had once depended on the man she dismissed. Meanwhile, the man walked home after the session. His shoulder throbbed, his feet ached, but he felt a quiet pride in having remained honest, composed, and respectful. He didn't expect praise or recognition. He knew that the work he had done, the life he had saved, and the integrity he had maintained were all that mattered. For him, life remained simple. Do what is right. Stay true to oneself and move forward. For her, the lesson had yet to be realized. Judgment had been formed without knowledge, decisions made without understanding, and assumptions drawn from appearances alone. She would soon be faced with the truth, and when that moment came, she would be forced to confront not just him, but her own bias, her own assumptions, and the ways she measured the worth of others. Neither knew that the connection between them was far deeper than they could imagine. And the coming days would challenge everything she believed about trust, courage, and human character. The days that followed were quiet, but full of small reminders that life had shifted. The woman returned to her office and routine, but she could not shake the faint sense that something was unsettled. She went through her tasks mechanically, yet the image of the man she had judged, the way he spoke, the careful calm in his actions kept drifting into her mind. It was subtle, fleeting, but persistent. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that judgments were necessary, that she had no reason to think twice. Yet, in private moments, when the office was silent and her thoughts wandered, she felt a vague, uncomfortable recognition. It was frustrating because she had no memory of where she had seen him before, no clue that he had once saved her life. Her pride and her sense of control demanded she suppress the feeling, to act as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, the man went about his life, as he always did. He fixed things, helped where he could, and moved quietly through the world. Some days were harder than others. He felt the pain in his shoulder, the ache in his back, and the weight of daily survival. Yet he remained steady, calm, and unassuming. To him, life was about small actions, the choices made in the moment, not recognition or reward. The intersection of their lives was closer than either realized. She was now in charge of reviewing his progress, evaluating his potential, and determining whether he would be allowed to move forward. The documents in front of her painted a picture that she interpreted through her own lens. Past struggles, gaps, modest education, worn appearance. To her eyes, these were signs of risk. She did not yet know the courage, resilience, or integrity hidden behind those details. When the man appeared again for a follow-up, he walked into the room with quiet determination. His posture was upright, his movements deliberate, and though he appeared ordinary, there was a subtle strength in the way he held himself. She observed him, and without realizing it, her mind began to question its assumptions. Something familiar tugged at her memory, though she could not place it. The panel asked questions, and he answered with the same honesty and clarity as before. Each response was measured, careful, and devoid of pretense. To her it was both irritating and puzzling. Why did he not assert himself more? Why not show more confidence? Yet at the same time, there was a quiet authority in his words, a calmness that seemed almost impossible to ignore. She found herself listening more closely, analyzing every detail, yet struggling to fit him into her preconceived categories. The more she examined, the more conflicted she became. Her internal voice told her to judge quickly, to rely on appearances and records. But another voice, faint and insistent, whispered that perhaps she did not know the full story. After the session ended, she stayed behind, pretending to review the papers in front of her while glancing occasionally toward the man. He left the room quietly, unaware of the scrutiny and the unease he had left behind. He walked down the hallway with measured steps, unbothered by the tension he might have caused. For him, the world remained simple. Do right, stay calm, and move forward. Outside the building, he paused for a moment, feeling the cool air on his face. He allowed himself a quiet breath, a small moment of relief. Life was hard, yes, but he had done his best, and that had always been enough. He did not know that the woman whose life he had once saved was already wrestling with her own conscience, questioning the assumptions she had made in mere seconds. Back in her office, the woman stared at the papers, her mind refusing to settle. She felt a strange tension, a need to understand more, to dig deeper. Something about the man did not fit the image she had created in her mind. She could not explain it, and yet she could not ignore it. The awareness gnawed at her quietly, making her restless. The next few days were filled with small, almost invisible signs that pushed her toward recognition. A gesture he made, a phrase he used, a calmness in his demeanor that reminded her of that terrifying night when she had almost died. Each tiny detail built upon the last, forming a thread that pulled at her memory. But still, she refused to acknowledge it fully. Accepting it would mean admitting she had judged wrongly, that her assumptions had been flawed. For the man, life continued without drama. He repaired what needed fixing, helped those who asked, and faced his own struggles quietly. He never spoke of the night when fear had threatened to take the woman's life, because he believed it was enough that she survived. Recognition, gratitude, or acknowledgement was irrelevant. What mattered was the simple act of doing what needed to be done. Yet fate was persistent. Their paths, though subtle and understated, kept intersecting. She would notice him briefly in hallways, in meetings, in passing glimpses that stirred memory, but did not yet awaken full realization. Each encounter intensified the growing discomfort within her, forcing her to confront feelings she had long ignored, doubt, curiosity, and a creeping humility that she found uncomfortable. The irony of the situation was cruel. She, the evaluator, the one accustomed to judging swiftly and decisively, was now being challenged by her own inability to understand him fully. She had relied on appearances, records, and assumptions, only to find that the man who seemed ordinary, fragile even, was far stronger than she had allowed herself to imagine. The story of their intersecting lives, of judgment and courage, of assumptions and truth, was approaching a turning point. She would soon be forced to confront the reality that the person she had quietly dismissed was someone who had already made a profound impact on her life. And when that revelation came, it would challenge everything she thought she knew about human character, courage, and the nature of judgment. Until then, both moved through their worlds in parallel. She, unaware of the depth of her error, and he, quietly resilient, unknowingly testing the very principles she had built her life upon. The coming days would change them both, revealing truths that neither could ignore, shaping lessons that would last far longer than the fleeting moments that had brought them together in the first place. The day of truth arrived. The woman sat at her desk, her mind unusually restless. She had reviewed the man's file multiple times, read his responses, considered his past, and yet could not shake the unease that something about him felt familiar. Something in his calmness, his humility, the careful honesty he displayed tugged at a memory she couldn't place. The man arrived at the office, his movements deliberate, careful, yet unassuming. He had done everything he could to prepare, answered every question with honesty, and maintained his composure through hours of scrutiny. For him, the session was just another step, another moment to meet life with integrity. Recognition, reward, and praise were irrelevant. The world had never demanded them from him. The woman watched him closely as he entered. Her mind spun with fragments of memory. A street, a screeching car, a hand pulling her back, the calm voice telling her to breathe. She blinked, shaking her head, trying to dismiss it as imagination. Yet each gesture he made, each small movement, matched that memory in an impossible way. The panel began their discussion. Other members debated, asked questions, and weighed the merits and risks. The woman found herself unusually quiet. Her thoughts kept returning to the man in front of her, and a strange tension formed in her chest. She had judged him harshly before, yet now she realized that judgment was built on incomplete knowledge and appearances. When he spoke again to answer a final question, his voice carried the same quiet authority, the same unassuming strength she remembered from that night. Her breath caught. Suddenly, it became undeniable. The man she had quietly dismissed, the one she judged based on his appearance, was the very man who had saved her life. Time seemed to slow. She remembered the terror, the screech of the car, the weight of her body as he pulled her away. She recalled the pain in her own chest, the fear in her eyes, and the calm, steady presence of someone who had risked everything for her. She felt a mix of emotion shock, guilt, relief, and admiration. Her pride, the very thing that had allowed her to judge so swiftly, now wrestled with humility. She realized she had been wrong to assume she knew someone's worth based on appearance or records alone. Courage, integrity, and character were not always visible at first glance. When the panel concluded, she stayed behind, asking a few clarifying questions, and quietly observed him as he collected his things. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Recognition passed between them, unspoken but profound. He did not need to speak. His past actions already communicated everything. She found herself struggling to find words. What could she say to someone who had saved her life, without expecting thanks, without asking for anything in return? Every word felt insufficient, almost trivial compared to the depth of his courage. She realized that life was not about appearances, judgments, or status. It was about actions, the choices made when it mattered most. The man noticed her hesitation, her quiet gaze, and offered a gentle nod. There was no accusation, no judgment, just calm acknowledgement. He had never sought recognition, and he did not expect it now. His dignity and strength required nothing from her. In that moment, she understood. Humility replaced pride, gratitude replaced judgment, and respect replaced assumptions. She had been blind to his true character before, and now she could see it clearly. It was a lesson that would stay with her forever. Later, as she reflected on the events, she realized how easily people are judged by appearances. She thought about all the times she had assumed, dismissed, or undervalued others based on superficial factors. The realization was uncomfortable but necessary. It forced her to examine her own biases, her own prejudices, and the ways she measured human worth. For the man, life remained simple. He continued his work, helped those in need, and moved through the world with quiet dignity. Recognition was never the goal, but the impact of his actions resonated far beyond what he could see. He had faced fear, made choices that mattered, remained true to himself. Their lives had intersected in a way that neither could have predicted. One moment of courage had created ripples that reached far beyond a single night. The woman, once quick to judge, had learned a profound lesson about human character, while the man, humble and steadfast, had shown that true heroism is quiet, unassuming, and unwavering. As they went their separate ways that day, the lessons lingered. She moved forward with a renewed perspective, carrying humility and gratitude in her heart. He moved forward with the same calm strength, unaffected by recognition, but grounded in the knowledge that he had done what was right. The story of that night, of fear, courage, judgment, and revelation, became a quiet testament to the power of human integrity. Actions mattered more than appearances. Courage was stronger than assumption. And the quietest voices could have the greatest impact. In the end, both were changed. She learned to see beyond the surface, to value character over presentation, and to approach life with humility. He continued to live simply but powerfully, proving that the measure of a person is found in their choices, their actions, and their willingness to stand for what is right, even when no one is watching. And in that convergence of lives, both realized something essential. True understanding requires more than observation. It requires empathy, courage, and the humility to accept that appearances can be deceiving, and that true worth is often hidden, waiting to be recognized not through judgment, but through the quiet. profound reality of action. Even after the revelation, life did not stop for either of them. The woman returned to her routines, but now each moment carried a subtle shift. She moved through her day with a new awareness, noticing details she had overlooked before: the tired janitor who quietly fixed broken chairs, the office assistant who went out of their way to help, the way people showed small acts of kindness without expecting recognition. Her eyes were open now to the quiet courage in ordinary lives. At first, she felt a strange mix of emotions when she thought of the man who had saved her. Gratitude, yes, but also guilt. How had she been so quick to judge someone whose actions had made the difference between life and death? She realized that the world often rewards the bold and visible, but true courage often resides in silence, in humility, and in decisions made when no one is watching. She decided to change the way she viewed others. Meetings became more thoughtful, evaluations more empathetic. She listened closely, asked questions, and looked beyond appearances. Her decisions now balanced authority with understanding, and she found that not only did others respond more positively, but she herself felt lighter, freer, as if a weight had been lifted. Meanwhile, the man continued his life quietly. He worked, helped, and moved forward as always. Fame or recognition had never been his goal, yet he noticed subtle changes around him. People seemed a little more respectful, colleagues a little more considerate. He did not know it, but his silent courage had inspired others, creating ripples in ways he would never see. One afternoon, the woman received a note. It was anonymous but thoughtful, highlighting small improvements in workflow, attention to detail, and care for others. She did not know who wrote it, yet she felt a spark of hope and humility. The note reminded her that actions matter, even if they go unnoticed. She thought of the man again, not as the person she had judged, but as someone who had changed her understanding of human character. His courage, quiet as it was, had taught her a lesson she would never forget: that the measure of a person lies in their choices, not in appearances, titles, or wealth. Over time, the woman began to share this lesson quietly with others. She would tell stories of courage and humility in meetings, emphasizing actions over judgment. Her influence grew, not through power or force, but through example. And she noticed that people began to act with more integrity, more care, more attention to the needs of others. The man continued to live simply, but he sensed change in the world around him. People smiled more, spoke with kindness, and respected the quiet effort in everyday tasks. He never took credit, never sought thanks. He simply did what he could, one step at a time, and trusted that small actions grounded in honesty and courage would ripple outward. Months later, the woman and the man crossed paths again, this time in a setting that was casual and unforced. Their eyes met, and recognition passed silently between them. No words were necessary. She nodded, a small smile forming, not just of gratitude, but of understanding. He returned the nod with calm dignity, knowing that the lesson had been learned and the connection acknowledged without fanfare. Life continued, as it always does, but both carried the memory and the lesson with them. For the woman, it became a guiding principle: see beyond appearances, judge actions, and value courage wherever it is found. For the man, it was confirmation of what he had always believed, that living with integrity and helping others without expectation is the truest at a measure of character. Their story, though quiet, became a testament to the unseen acts of bravery that shape lives. It reminded everyone that heroism does not always wear a visible face, that recognition is not necessary for meaning, and that a single act of courage can transform perspectives, inspire change, and leave lasting ripples in ways no one can measure. In the end, both learned that the world is not simply what it appears to be. Kindness, bravery, and understanding often hide in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice, waiting to shape lives silently. And sometimes the greatest lessons come not from those in power or prominence, but from ordinary people willing to act rightly, quietly, and courageously when it matters most. life continued to move forward for both of them. Yet the events of that night and the days that followed had created subtle, lasting changes. The woman carried with her a newfound awareness of human courage and humility. She approached each day differently, noticing the quiet acts of kindness that often went unseen. Her colleagues began to notice the change in her demeanor. The way she paused to listen, how she treated people with more patience and respect. It was a small transformation, but one that grew steadily over time. She often thought of the man who had saved her life. At first, the memory brought a pang of guilt. How quickly she had judged him based on appearance. How she had dismissed his value without truly knowing him. But as time passed, that feeling shifted to something deeper: admiration and understanding. She realized that the world often overlooks those who act without expectation of reward, and she began to carry that lesson in every interaction. Meanwhile, the man continued his daily life in quiet resilience. His routines remained simple but meaningful. He worked with diligence, helped those in need whenever he could, and navigated the challenges of life with a calm strength. Though he did not seek recognition, he sometimes noticed subtle changes around him. People began to show more courtesy. Neighbors smiled more, and even strangers seemed slightly kinder. These small ripples of change reassured him that actions, even quiet ones, could have profound effects. One afternoon, the woman found herself walking through a crowded market. She noticed a street performer struggling with his equipment. Without thinking, she paused and helped him adjust the stand, ensuring that his instruments would not fall. The gratitude in his eyes reminded her of that night when her own life had been saved by someone who acted selflessly. She smiled quietly, realizing that paying forward even small acts of kindness could make a difference. Across town, the man was performing a similar act of quiet heroism. He noticed a young child struggling to cross a busy street alone. Without hesitation, he guided the child safely to the sidewalk, keeping a watchful eye on the traffic. The mother, who had been distracted, turned just in time to see her child safe. She offered a thankful nod, and he simply nodded back, his heart calm. Knowing that helping others was reward enough, their lives, though not intertwined at every moment, were shaped by the same principles: courage, integrity, and compassion. Both had learned that heroism was not about recognition, titles, or applause, but about the choices made in moments that truly mattered. Weeks later, the woman received an unexpected invitation to attend a community event celebrating acts of courage and public service. She was hesitant at first, unsure of her role, but she decided to go. The event was modest, held in a local hall, with stories shared quietly and without fanfare. People spoke of bravery in everyday life, small but meaningful actions that made a difference in someone's world. When she arrived, she saw the man among the crowd. Their eyes met briefly, and she felt the familiar recognition that had surfaced before. There was no need for words. In that glance, everything was understood: the courage, the humility, the lives changed by a single act. They were connected not by titles or status, but by the human bond formed in a moment of need. During the event, she listened to stories of people who had helped strangers, risked themselves for others, and acted selflessly. Each story reinforced what she had already begun to understand. The measure of a person was not in what the world saw, but in what they did when no one was watching. She felt inspired, motivated to carry this lesson further, to live by it fully. After the event, she approached the man quietly. There was no dramatic declaration, no public acknowledgement. She simply said, "Thank you. You changed how I see the world." His calm gaze met hers, and he nodded in understanding. No further words were needed. The bond between them was understood, and the lesson had been learned. In the days that followed, returned to their routines, yet nothing was quite the same. The woman approached her work with deeper empathy, making decisions that balanced judgment with compassion. She observed the world with a keener eye, noticing courage and kindness in unexpected places. She began sharing stories with colleagues, emphasizing integrity, humility, and the impact of quiet acts of bravery. The man continued his life quietly, his influence spreading subtly through the choices he made. His courage and integrity had already shaped the perspective of the woman who had once judged him, and now extended to countless others who observed, consciously or unconsciously, the ripple effects of his actions. Over time, both understood that life was not measured by recognition or rewards, but by the courage to act rightly, the humility to help without expectation, and the empathy to see beyond appearances. They had learned that even the smallest actions, performed with integrity, could change the course of lives and shape the world in profound ways. Their story remained quiet, uncelebrated in the public eye, yet it carried a timeless lesson. Courage was not always loud, and heroism did not always demand attention. Sometimes it lived in simple choices, in moments of selflessness, and in the quiet persistence of those who did the right thing because it was right in the end. Both of them continued to walk their paths, guided by the lessons of that night. The woman with her renewed understanding of human character, and the man with his steadfast commitment to act rightly. Their lives were forever connected by a single, extraordinary moment, a shared experience that transcended words, status, and recognition. And in that quiet, unassuming way, they both lived with the knowledge that true courage and integrity leave an indelible mark, not always visible, but always powerful, shaping lives, inspiring change, and reminding the world of the profound impact of simple, human acts done without expectation.